Inflation is a popular topic of discussion right now. And one of the things that's grown in popularity as a result of inflation is a thing called I bonds, where the I stands for inflation. It's important to note that I bonds are not sold on a secondary market, so they need to be purchased directly through a website called treasurydirect.gov is one of the easier ways of getting ownership of I bonds. So I'm going to walk through that process right now and a few more details of how I bonds work. What we're looking at here is a website, treasurydirect.gov, and we're going to scroll down to how to buy Series I bonds. First, it's important to note the initial interest rate on any new Series I savings bonds is currently 7.12%. So the date of this recording, April of 2022, you can buy bonds at that rate, the 7.12%. So what is an I bond? It's a security that earns interest based on a fixed rate and also a rate of inflation that's set twice a year. And the bond earns that interest rate until it reaches 30 years of maturity or you cash it out, whatever comes first. So it also looks at ownership, who may own them, individuals, children under 18, trusts and estates. And how can I buy them? You can buy them in electronic form using treasurydirect.gov or buy them in a paper form using your federal income tax refund. Another important thing to note is that you pay the face value for the bonds. They're not sold at a discount. So the face value is what you put in. How much can I buy for myself? In a calendar year, you can acquire up to $10,000 in electronic I bonds using Treasury Direct, or up to $5,000 in paper I bonds using your federal income tax refund. So it's important to note those limits apply separately. So you could have up to $15,000 in I bonds in any calendar year if you take advantage of both options. A few other things about how to redeem them. It's important to note on these you have a minimum holding period of at least 12 months. So we cannot cash them out in the first 12 months. After that, if you cash it out after 12 months and before it's 5 years old, you will lose the last 3 months of interest. I bonds earn interest for 30 years if you don't cash them before they mature, and there are some other provisions that may apply for an early redemption. But it's important to note the first 12 months you cannot cash. From 12 months to 5 years, there's a 3-month penalty of interest that you forfeit. After 5 years, there's no forfeiture of interest. You get the full dollar amount if you cash them out. Let's look a little more at the rates and terms of those. So again, the composite rate for I bonds issued November 21 through April 22 is 7.12. How do we calculate that rate of return? There are two components to I bonds. One is the fixed rate. The second is the inflation rate. For the fixed rate, as of right now, the fixed rate is 0% on any new I bonds that are issued. The semi-annual inflation rate is 3.56. So we take that number times 2 to get our annual rate, and that's where we're coming up with the composite rate of 7.12%. Gives a little detail here of when your interest rate changes. So it's important to note that your rate lasts for the first 6 months of ownership, and that is your starting period. So if you buy one in April, your rate resets April 1, and the new rate will apply October 1. So a little more history on the fixed rates. A lot of years those have been 0. There's a few years where there was something 0.2, 0.5, and the fixed rate again is what lasts for the life of the bond, but currently anything issued is at 0. The inflation rate is the part that fluctuates quite a bit more frequently. So there we have our 6-month rate, the 3.56 that was set in November of 21. In May of 21, it was 1.77. Keep in mind you have to double these to figure out what your annualized rate is. So I get often asked, well, how come I've never heard of these before? We look back through the history and the interest rates or the inflation rate that was being paid wasn't that different than what you could earn on other products that had guarantees on it. So as of right now, the inflation rate is running higher than what it has historically, which is where something like I bonds tends to pick up a little more popularity. We're also briefly going to look at some tax considerations of this. It's always good to consult with a tax professional for your personal situation. Here are just a quick couple of details on these. That the interest on your savings bonds is subject to federal income tax, but not state or local income tax. There are some other provisions for estate and gift taxes that may apply. So again, check with a tax professional on your particular situation. One very important thing to note is when must I report the interest on my tax return? So you have a choice actually in this matter where you can report the interest every year, or you can defer reporting interest until one of the first of these events occurs. Either you cash out the bond, you give up ownership of the bond, or the bond stops earning interest because you've reached the final maturity. And again, that would be after 30 years. Now we're going to take a look at how to actually set up the account through treasurydirect.gov. So if you've determined this is a good fit for your situation, we can go to the individuals and then Treasury Direct. And we're going to hit the login here and then open a new account. So it asks for some information. We're going to hit the apply now. In this case, I would be setting it, if I were setting it up for myself, I would set up as an individual and then fill in your personal financial information here, linking a bank account so you can make direct deposits, and then hit submit. Once you've created your account, you will see this as your login screen. So there's nothing currently held in here. If you want to go ahead and buy one of the Series I bonds, you hit the Buy Direct button, and then make sure you select the right one. In this case, if I wanted to buy the Series I would select that, and then that would walk you through the steps of making the purchase